So, Rebecca, here we are, end of year, and I think we got a big one here. We haven't over-rehearsed it as ever. It's about not the prevention of escalation of conflict, because certainly I've come to the conclusion that when conflict's happening, it's going somewhere. It's a matter of managing it. The prevention of unhelpful escalation, which is a big thing to ask of people in the midst of very often an emotional activity of any sort in any context. So having just said those words, what does that raise for you?
I think it's interesting. Yes, I think it's just because it's conflict doesn't mean to say it's bad, but like you say, it's preventing it from getting to that stage where it can't be useful. So I think conflict can actually be quite a useful it can be a useful experience for both parties, because it brings in different ideas, but like you say, it's the managing of it that's important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And all the theory tells us that conflict isn't always harmful. I think the reality is most conflict we're involved in actually is. And you know, I'll buy entirely there's a need for more of it if it's carefully managed. My experience of 40 years is I don't see very much of that. So I think where I'm coming from, and I'm not looking to sort of this is what we'll do, but where I'm coming from is let's presume that conflict is in its usual state. It's not where we want to be. It's not feeling like it's going to go where we want it to. We don't like the feelings we're getting while we're doing it. So what can we do to minimize, because I don't think we can eradicate, to minimize the unhelpful consequences of an endpoint we didn't really want to be? And I've had some thoughts about that, but again, I want to be led, no doubt about this, by you and your thoughts, because these thoughts in my head are my thoughts. I'm looking for yours.
I think that's a really good point. And I think the first point is recognizing that you are experiencing some sort of emotional response. And because if we don't, we can just get carried along with that energy. And that's where the problems really do escalate. So there's a mindfulness technique that I've come across and used personally to good effect. You have to remember it at the time you need it, but it's really good to practice. It's very simple, and it's literally called STOP, and it's an acronym. So S is yeah. So S is for stop. So it's literally just stop for a moment and pause. Okay, and then O is for observe. So observe what's going on. What sensations are you feeling in your body? What's being said or not said? What's actually happening in the situation? So we're observing it. We then oh sorry, I've missed one.
So you were turning it into soft of the
yes, S is stop. T, this is the important one. T is take a breath. So take a breath, so or one or two or three, so slowly and deeply just breathe, and that again will just slow down your thinking a little bit and give you a moment. Sure. Then it's O for observe, so observing what's going on in yourself and other people. And then P is proceed in a way that you won't later regret. So what you're doing is buying yourself a little bit of time to actually just step back a moment, observe the situation, observe your response, and then decide what is the best option in this moment. And that might be to walk away, that might be to call a timeout, or that might be to, you know, deal with it in a different way. But it just gives you that moment of pause to reconsider the direction that you're traveling in.
I like that, thank you. Because that gives, I like acronyms. I've got so many of them. And for me, on first acquaintance, the most important one is the first. Because if you haven't stopped, you can't do the other things. Yeah. But all too often, we just don't stop. We just get carried along by this unhelpful wave of conflict-ridden, emotional impulse driving stuff that we then say, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I say that? How did I let that get to where it got to? And I think the stopping thing, sometimes that has to be quite overt. Hang on a minute, saying the words, I want to pause at this, but I want to walk away, like you say. I want to give myself a breath. Because not recognizing when there was a need to stop is for me, and I'm glad you gave me this, is for me probably the most significant reason things get worse than they should have.
Yeah, and this is the thing, you have to be able to recognize that you're the conflict is going in a particular way that you're not comfortable with, or you don't want it to go that way. So you have to physically stop at that point. And sometimes that just takes the energy out of it, because it's sort of almost like a disruption technique, isn't it, really? If you literally say stop, or, you know, to the other person, it just switches something, just even if it gives you a moment to really break that pattern, so that you have got time to decide, right, hang on a minute, how else could we deal with this? We don't have to keep going down that path.
Again, we agree far too often. We'll have to have some conflict next year so that we can actually spark a bit more. We've come to agree far too much. I entirely buy this. And I think that's it is about recognition, isn't it? It's also about having the strength, and I'll say that again, the strength to control the conversation and say, at this point, I need 2 minutes. And I think it's a weakness to allow yourself to be carried along by something you could have controlled. So it's a strength, not a weakness, to say, my head's full of stuff at the moment. I want to make sure this works right. And a lot of this is about articulation as well, isn't it? Finding the right words. And it's so difficult. Let's not kid ourselves. In the moment, reflecting in the moment is a very hard time to use learning. And the learning to use is, hang on a minute, I knew this would happen. I'm in the situation I thought I'd be in. There's a better way to do this. Right now, I need to stop. Having the courage to do that right thing is a difficult thing, I think, to do a lot of the time.
It is. I think you're right there. It is a strength to recognise that I'm not happy with this situation, and I want to change this situation. But you do have to. It's the awareness that's key, you know, and recognising that there is an alternative, that you don't have to go down the route that you're going with it. And this, for me, it's important to learn this technique outside of conflict. You need to be sort of fully understanding of it to use it in the moment, because like you said, in the moment our brain is somewhere else, you know, so we have to be able to recall this exercise when we need it. So it's a really nice one to use if you're experiencing something very pleasurable as well, because sometimes we're not fully present. So actually, if you can practice it in a situation where you're enjoying it, that's a really good time to practice. So I'm stopping, I'm taking a breath, I'm going to enjoy this situation, and I'm going to proceed by just appreciating it, you know. So if you can practice in a non-conflict environment, then hopefully you can remember it when you need it most.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I can see it's not confined contextually to the conflict thing. And I like that. I'm really glad that you gave it to me. And we hadn't rehearsed this, folks. That was a surprise to me as it came my way, which is good. I like techniques. So on my little post-it there under the light, which is shining in my face, I've got escalation, not prevention. And that's an acceptance that here we're talking about not a prevention of conflict. Conflict very often is going to go somewhere. It's going to end up at a point. You can't stop it in its tracks and take it back where it came from. So it is all about managing, influencing at least that by your behaviour. I've also got prevention of harmful escalation, because the point of this is, I get the feeling that particularly if the agenda is owned by some other party, it could very often go somewhere you didn't want it to. You've got to get in there and influence it for your own good.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think if you have got to a point where temperature is raised, you know, and emotions are running high, then you have to be able to walk away at some point. You need to know when to walk away as well. So I remember a year or so ago, I was on some training at work, and they were talking about that actually. You have a physical response to conflict. You have that physical response where you get the hormones and things running around your body. And actually it can take, if you get to a point where it is up here, it can take an hour before the person or yourself is back down to normal levels. So there is no point trying to re-engage until they've had time to calm down. And I think that's another thing, because sometimes what can happen is people will keep pushing and pushing and pushing, you know, or try and resolve it as soon as it's happened, and you can't. You have to leave it for a while before you come back to it, and come back at it from a different angle, perhaps.
I used to know a bit about this. I used to know a little bit about the physiological stuff, about noradrenaline and adrenaline. So you're right, there are actually physiological reasons for this. I used to, and I think I still do, try not to do anything excitable before I go to bed, because otherwise you think, why is it 2:45 and I'm still awake? It's because you've done things to your body that's kick-started it, said, right, where's the bear? Where's this horrible thing that I've got to take on? It's fight or flight. Fight or flight is far too easy and superficial. Behind that are the behaviors which caused it as a consequence. To just talk glibly about fight or flight, it's all very well, but we created that situation and it is manageable, like you say. So consciously being in control of that situation, having first recognized it's important. So I don't understand. So I've also got, I'm only saying this, saying it aloud so that I can say afterwards I've covered all the things I want. Avoiding emotional reaction, and you just said it. Conflict very often is something personal. It involves us, our well-being, our status with ourselves, if nothing else, ego, but maybe other things. Conflict very often is very personal and can be extremely significant and harmful. So avoiding the emotional reactions, particularly if somebody, and I've read all the Yuri stuff, so I know about walk away batteners, best alternative to negotiate agreements, and I know about hot buttons. It's possible that some people are deliberately pressing your hot buttons. If I say this to Rebecca, watch what happens. Whoa, there she goes. Sometimes we just got to avoid ourselves being either manipulated or responding to others' behavior.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point, isn't it? And again, it's to do with that self-awareness for me is, oh, somebody's just pressed a button there. I don't know whether they've done that deliberately or whether it's just triggered something in me, but I'm recognizing that a button's been triggered and I need to respond to this differently. So there is that recognition there, and then deciding, right, is that about them? Is that about me? Because sometimes it's more about the other person. You know, it's maybe that they need something or want something, and like you say, trying to be manipulative. So just being aware of, right, what's happening in this moment and what are my options?
Yeah, and as an observer of other people, and to a degree myself, I'm not often impressed by people, but sometimes the people who impress me most are those that don't react to other people's attempts to manipulate them. So in a meeting, I'll look at someone and I'll think, oh, I know what's just happened there. They're looking for reaction. And they just sit there going, what else you got? Okay, there's the calm face that said, nope, that didn't work. Well, I thought, oh, I like that.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's because that takes the energy out of it, isn't it? That's what's happening here, is they're trying to evoke some sort of emotion. And if you don't respond, then it doesn't meet that need in the other person. They may try something else, or it may just actually just pull the plug on them and sort of deflate the situation completely. So if you can respond, because like you said before, it's a reaction, isn't it? So our reaction is a reaction to somebody else's behavior or whatever, and then they react to our behavior, and it becomes a very vicious cycle. So we have to put a break in at some point.
Well, absolutely. And I guess looking for closure, because as ever, we could talk for much longer, but we're trying to keep these tight. The last thing on my list is behavior breeds behavior. It's a Peter Honey fundamental of behavior. I think of it a lot consciously. I don't always adhere to it, but behavior breeds behavior. How we behave influences, sometimes to the point of almost dictates the behavior of others. If I don't listen to you, you're not going to listen to me. If I show real interest in you, you're more likely to show real interest in me. And so it goes on. So our behavior breeds the behavior in others. We respond to others' behavior. All of this stuff is not something you need to spend 4 years learning at university. This is real world stuff. It's going on out there. We can learn from this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you've just said there is, it's about that matching and mirroring to some extent. And if we can see things escalating, if we're aware enough, then we can sort of demonstrate behavior that starts to calm things down. We can start talking a bit slower and a little bit quieter. And then, like you said, that encourages the other person. There are definitely things that we can do to manage and prevent that escalation from going any further.
Good. It's good. I can use this every day. This is my world. Okay, Rebecca, thanks so much. And this is probably our end of 2022 one. So thanks for everything. And I think we've created some good stuff out there for people this year.
Thank you for some very invigorating talks.
Oh, we are so wonderful. Thank you. Cheers.